Rain drummed against the solicitor's windows in a steady, melancholic rhythm that matched the weight in Cordelia Ashford's chest. She sat rigidly in the corner of Mr. Pemberton's office, hands folded in her lap, trying to make herself invisible as her mother negotiated her future like one might haggle over the price of livestock. £20,000 to clear the debts, Lady Beatrice Ashford said, her voice carrying that particular tone of false sweetness she reserved for people she considered beneath her. Surely that's reasonable, Mr. Vale, for the privilege of marrying into the Ashford family. Cordelia's cheeks burned. The privilege, as if her family name still meant anything beyond the weight of unpaid bills and crumbling estate walls. The terms are acceptable, came the reply, and Cordelia found herself really looking, at the man who would become her husband. Tristan Vale sat across from her mother, with the stillness of someone accustomed to being underestimated. He wore a simple dark coat, well made, but unremarkable, and his brown hair needed a trim. Nothing about him screamed wealth or status, yet something in the way he held himself, the quiet confidence in his posture, made her pause. "How fortunate for you, Mr. Vale," her mother continued, examining her gloves as if they were far more interesting than the conversation. "That a gentleman of trade should have the opportunity to associate with nobility, even if our circumstances are temporarily reduced." The solicitor cleared his throat uncomfortably. Cordelia wanted to sink through the floor, but Tristan merely smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips that suggested he found the whole performance mildly amusing. "Indeed, Lady Ashford, how fortunate." His gaze shifted then, landing on Cordelia with unexpected directness. "Miss Ashford, you've been remarkably silent. Might I ask your thoughts on this arrangement?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her opinion in months. She'd been shuffled from potential suitor to potential suitor like an unwanted parcel. Each rejection, another crack in what remained of her dignity. She straightened her spine, meeting his eyes. They were gray, she noticed. Storm cloud gray. "I need to save my family from ruin, Mr. Vale. You appear to be a decent man offering a practical solution. That seems sufficient." Something flickered in his expression. Not offense, but something deeper. Understanding, perhaps. "Sufficient," he repeated softly. "Then we have an agreement, Miss Ashford." When he stood to shake hands with the solicitor, Cordelia caught the scent of ink and something woodsy. Cedar, maybe. It was oddly comforting. Her mother rose with exaggerated grace. "We shall expect the settlement transferred by tomorrow. The wedding can proceed this Saturday. No need for unnecessary pomp, given the circumstances." Translation. They couldn't afford a proper wedding, and her mother was mortified by the whole affair. "Saturday suits me perfectly," Tristan said, then turned back to Cordelia. "Miss Ashford, would you permit me to call on you tomorrow? I thought we might discuss our expectations." "Of course," she managed, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. As he left, she noticed the quality of his boots, worn but expensive leather, the way he moved through the doorway with unconscious elegance. Nothing quite added up, but she was too tired to puzzle it out. That evening, Cordelia sat in her small bedroom while her younger brother Edmund sprawled in the chair by her window, his lanky 19-year-old frame taking up more space than seemed physically possible. "You don't have to do this, Cora," he said quietly, using his childhood nickname for her. "We could find another way." "What other way?" She attempted a smile. "You need to finish university. The estate needs repairs we can't afford. Mother's creditors are circling like vultures. At least this way." She trailed off, staring at her hands. "At least this way, I'm useful." Edmund's jaw tightened. "You're worth more than a transaction." "Am I?" The words came out sharper than intended. 24 years old, unmarried with no dowry, and a family name worth less than the paper it's printed on. Mr. Vale is offering salvation. That's more than most would do. "But do you want to marry him?" Cordelia thought of Tristan Vale's gray eyes, the way he'd asked her opinion when no one else had, the quiet strength in his posture. Want doesn't factor into this equation, she said finally. But he seems kind. That's more than I'd hoped for. Edmund stood, crossing to press a kiss to her forehead. You deserve love, Cora. Real love, not just kindness. After he left, she lay awake listening to the old house settle around her, wondering what her life would become. She'd once dreamed of love, of passion, of someone who would see her, truly see her, and choose her anyway. Now she'd settle for a husband who wouldn't make her miserable. The bar, she thought wryly, had been set remarkably low. Saturday arrived with crisp October sunshine that felt like a mockery of the occasion. The church was small, tucked away in an unfashionable part of London, and the ceremony itself was attended by precisely 4 people: Edmund, Tristan's housekeeper Martha, the priest, and themselves. Her mother had claimed a headache. The relief Cordelia felt at her absence was probably sinful. Martha was a surprise, a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. She'd embraced Cordelia before the ceremony, smelling of lavender and fresh bread. "Welcome, dear girl," she'd whispered. "He's a good man, better than most, no." There was something odd about the way she said it, an emphasis that suggested hidden meaning, but Cordelia had no time to contemplate it before the priest was calling them forward. Tristan wore a well-tailored dark suit that transformed him from merely presentable to quietly striking. When he took her hand, his grip was warm and steady. The vows passed in a blur of words that felt both momentous and surreal. When the priest pronounced them married, Tristan squeezed her hand gently. "I promise," he said, so quietly only she could hear, "that you won't regret this." Something in his voice made her throat tighten. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Edmund hugged her fiercely afterward. "Write to me," he demanded, "every week." "I'm only moving across London, not to America," she said, trying to laugh. "Still, write." The carriage Tristan had hired was comfortable, but unremarkable. As they drove through London's streets, Cordelia watched the city pass by, feeling like she was leaving one life behind and stepping into another she couldn't quite envision. "Nervous?" Tristan asked. She glanced at him. He wasn't looking at her, giving her the privacy to compose herself. "Wouldn't you be?" she countered. His lips twitched. "Terrified, actually." The admission surprised a laugh out of her. "You? Why?" "I'm 24 hours into marriage with a woman I barely know, hoping desperately that I don't prove to be a complete disappointment." There was humor in his voice, but also genuine concern. Cordelia found herself relaxing slightly. "I have remarkably low expectations," she said lightly. "So you're already ahead." This time he did look at her, and the expression in his eyes was both amused and something else. Something that made her pulse quicken. "Then I shall endeavor," he said, "to exceed them." The house Tristan brought her to was in a respectable neighborhood. Solid, well-maintained, comfortable, but not ostentatious. The kind of home a successful merchant might own. Cordelia had grown up in a crumbling country manor that was all pretense and no substance. This felt like the opposite. Honest. Real. Martha was already there, having left the church early to prepare. She showed Cordelia through the rooms with obvious pride, a cozy parlor, a surprisingly large dining room, and a library that made Cordelia's breath catch. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, not the musty, unread collections that decorated aristocratic homes, but volumes that showed signs of use. Worn spines, bookmarks, margins with notes. "Mr. Vale spends most of his evenings here," Martha said warmly. "Reading, working. He's quite devoted to his studies." Cordelia ran her fingers along the spines. Economics, philosophy, travel journals, poetry. The breadth was impressive. "Your room is this way, dear," Martha continued, leading her upstairs. The bedroom was lovely, smaller than what she'd grown up with, but infinitely more comfortable. A fire crackled in the grate, and the bed looked impossibly inviting after the emotional exhaustion of the day. "Mr. Vale's room?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "He uses the study downstairs," Martha said matter-of-factly. "Said he didn't want to, presume. You're to have your privacy. He insisted on it. Cordelia wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or oddly disappointed. That evening, after Martha had left them with a knowing smile, Cordelia found Tristan in the library. He'd changed into more casual clothes and was bent over a desk covered in papers, his hair falling into his eyes as he wrote. "I won't disturb you long," she said from the doorway. "I just wanted to thank you for today, for all of this." He looked up, and for a moment she saw exhaustion in his face. Then he smiled, and it transformed him. "Come in," he said. "Please. This is your home now, too." She entered hesitantly, drawn to the books like a moth to flame. "You have quite the collection." "My one indulgence," he admitted. "Books have always been safer than people." The raw honesty in the statement made her turn to look at him. "Safer?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those gray eyes. "People tend to want things from you. Books just offer knowledge without demands." "That sounds lonely." "Sometimes." He paused. "But you're here now. Perhaps that will change." The words hung between them, full of possibility and uncertainty. Cordelia's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I should let you work," she said, backing toward the door. "Cordelia?" His use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her. "I meant what I said. You won't regret this. I intend to be a good husband to you." She believed him. That was the most surprising thing of all. "Good night, Tristan," she said softly. Lying in bed later, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a new house settling around her, Cordelia found herself thinking not of what she'd lost, but of what might be possible. Gray eyes and gentle hands, and a library full of books. Perhaps, she thought drowsily, sufficient might turn into something more. The first week of marriage was an education in contradictions. Tristan left early each morning, always neatly dressed, carrying a leather satchel full of papers. He returned late, sometimes smelling of tobacco smoke and coffee, other times of rain and horse leather. Martha prepared meals, hummed while she worked, and occasionally made comments that suggested she knew far more about her employer than Cordelia did. "The master's always been particular about his privacy," Martha said one morning, kneading bread dough with practiced efficiency. "But he's got a good heart. You'll see." Cordelia, attempting to help in the kitchen despite Martha's protests, wondered what exactly she was meant to see. Their evenings together were surprisingly pleasant. They dined at the modest table, and Tristan asked about her day with genuine interest. She found herself telling him things about the books she'd discovered in his library, about her childhood, about Edmund's dreams of becoming a barrister. "Your brother seems remarkably intelligent," Tristan observed one evening, pouring wine into her glass. "Has he considered which chambers he'd like to join after university?" "He can't afford." "Chambers," Cordelia said quietly. "After university, if we can even manage that, he'll need to find whatever work he can." Tristan was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Perhaps I could help. I have some connections in legal circles." "You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "He's your family. That makes him mine now, too." The simple statement made her throat tight. Her own mother had never shown such consideration for Edmund's future. She was, Cordelia realized with growing surprise, beginning to like her husband quite a lot. The disaster happened on Thursday. Determined to contribute somehow to the household, Cordelia had convinced Martha to let her prepare dinner. She'd found a recipe for beef stew that seemed straightforward enough. How difficult could it be? Very difficult, apparently. By the time Tristan arrived home, the kitchen was filled with smoke. The stew had somehow burned, while simultaneously remaining raw in the middle, and Cordelia was near tears of frustration. "What's that smell?" he asked, entering the kitchen cautiously. Cordelia gestured helplessly at the pot. "Dinner, or what was meant to be dinner. I don't know what I did wrong. I followed the recipe exactly." Tristan approached the stove, peered into the pot, and made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "Are you laughing?" she demanded, mortification flooding through her. "No," he said, but his shoulders were shaking. "Absolutely not. I would never." He caught sight of her face and suddenly burst into full laughter, rich and genuine. For a moment, Cordelia's pride flared. Then she looked at the disaster she'd created, at Tristan trying desperately to compose himself, and suddenly she was laughing too. Great, gasping laughs that left her breathless. "I'm a complete failure as a wife," she managed between giggles. "Nonsense," he said, wiping his eyes. "You're merely a failure as a cook. That's entirely different." "Oh, much better," she said dryly, which only made him laugh harder. Martha appeared in the doorway, took in the scene, and shook her head with fond exasperation. "I'll make sandwiches," she declared. "You two are hopeless." They ate bread and cheese and pickles in the library, sitting on the floor in front of the fire like children, and Cordelia couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so light. Tristan told her about a disastrous business meeting where he'd spilled ink all over a contract, and she shared the story of accidentally releasing her mother's prized peacocks during a garden party. "You didn't," he said, delighted. "I was 8 and curious about the latch," she defended. "How was I to know they'd stampede through Lady Worthington's tea service?" Their hands brushed as they reached for the same pickle, and the laughter faded into something else. Something that made her acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth of his body, the way he was looking at her. "Cordelia," he said softly. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes?" But Martha chose that moment to appear with tea, and the spell broke. Tristan pulled back, and Cordelia tried to ignore the disappointment that flooded through her. That night, lying in bed, she admitted something she'd been avoiding. She was attracted to her husband. More than that, she was beginning to care for him in ways that went far beyond their practical arrangement. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. A week later, Tristan asked her to accompany him to his office. "There are some documents you'll need to sign," he explained over breakfast. "Boring financial matters, but necessary." Cordelia agreed readily. She was curious about his work, about this life he lived outside their home. The carriage ride took them into the city, London's financial heart. The buildings grew taller, more imposing, and Cordelia watched as people hurried past with the focused determination of those engaged in serious commerce. They stopped in front of an impressive stone building. The brass plaque beside the door read, "Vale Enterprises." A doorman opened the door with a deep bow. "Good morning, sir." "Sir?" Cordelia glanced at Tristan, but he was already ushering her inside. The lobby was all marble and dark wood, and the people they passed didn't just acknowledge Tristan, they practically bowed. A young clerk nearly dropped his papers in his haste to get out of their way. "Mr. Vale, sir, we weren't expecting you until this afternoon," a well-dressed man said, hurrying over. "Shall I have the boardroom prepared?" "Not necessary, Harrison, just the private office." They took a lift, an actual lift, not stairs, to the top floor. The corridor was hushed, expensive, and the door at the end opened to reveal an office that made Cordelia's breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked London. The furniture was exquisite, and the desk, massive mahogany, covered in neat stacks of papers, spoke of serious business conducted on a serious scale. "Tristan," she said slowly, "what exactly do you do?" He moved to the desk, shuffling through papers with practiced ease. "I invest, buy and sell properties, finance various ventures." She picked up a document from the desk. It was a deed for a building in Cheapside. She picked up another, shares in a shipping company. Another, ownership papers for what appeared to be a factory in Birmingham. "This is..." She looked around the office again, seeing it with new eyes. "You're not just a merchant." "I never said I was," he pointed out mildly. "But you let me think." "I let you think what you wish to think," he said, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm a man who works for his living, that much is true. But you're wealthy." The evidence was everywhere, impossible to deny. Something flickered in his expression. Wariness, disappointment. "Does that change anything? Did it?" Cordelia sank into one of the leather chairs, processing. The modest house, the simple life, Martha's odd comments. All of it suddenly made a different kind of sense. "Why hide it?" she asked finally. Tristan leaned against his desk, arms crossed. The pose was casual, but his body language was tense. "Because I wanted," he said carefully, "to be chosen for myself, not for what I could provide." "I don't understand." "No," he agreed. "You wouldn't. You were forced into marrying me by circumstance. But I wasn't forced into anything. I chose you, Cordelia. I chose you because when we met in that solicitor's office, you were the only person in the room who looked at me like I was a person, not a solution or a stepping stone." His words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she knew. "The documents," he said, gesturing to the desk. "They're a settlement, property in your name alone, income that can't be touched by anyone, including me. You'll never be dependent or desperate again." "Why would you do that?" "Because," he said simply, "you deserve security, and because I don't want you staying with me out of obligation." Cordelia stood, moved closer to him. His jaw was tight, and she realized with sudden clarity that he was afraid. Afraid of her reaction, afraid of being wanted only for his wealth. "You're an impossible man," she said. "I'm aware. You should have told me." "Perhaps," he met her eyes. "Does it matter? Does this—" He gestured at the office. "Change what you think of me? Did it?" She thought of the man who'd carried her books from the library, who'd laughed when she'd burned dinner, who'd offered to help Edmund without being asked, who came home smelling of work and effort, regardless of the fortune at his disposal. "No," she said finally. "It doesn't change anything. You're still— you." She saw relief flood his features, quickly masked. "However," she continued, "we're going to have a conversation about honesty. Partners tell each other things, Tristan. Partners," he repeated, and a slow smile curved his lips. "I like that word." "As do I." She held out her hand. "So, partners." He took her hand, and instead of shaking it, he raised it to his lips. The kiss he pressed to her knuckles was brief, but sent heat racing up her arm. "Partners," he agreed, his voice rough. The ride home was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence. Charged. Aware. Cordelia found herself noticing things she'd been trying to ignore. The breadth of his shoulders, the elegant length of his fingers, the way his presence seemed to fill any space he occupied. "You're staring," he said, amused. "You're worth staring at," she replied, then immediately flushed at her boldness. His hand found hers on the seat between them, threading their fingers together. "Cordelia Ashford, Cordelia Vale," he corrected. "You're full of surprises." "So are you," she murmured. "Apparently." When they reached home, Martha took one look at their joined hands and clasped faces, and smiled like she'd been expecting this all along. Edmund came to dinner the following week, and Cordelia was startled by how easily he and Tristan fell into conversation. They debated philosophy over the soup, argued good-naturedly about parliamentary reform during the main course, and by dessert were planning Edmund's future as if it were already decided. "There's a chambers in Lincoln's Inn," Tristan was saying. "The senior partner is a friend. I could arrange an introduction." "I couldn't possibly," Edmund started. "You could, and you will," Tristan interrupted firmly. "You have the intelligence for law. It would be a waste not to pursue it." Edmund looked to Cordelia helplessly. "Tell him he doesn't have to do this." "I've tried telling him many things," Cordelia said dryly. "He doesn't listen." "I listen," Tristan protested. "I simply choose to do what's right anyway." After dinner, Edmund pulled her aside while Tristan was occupied with brandy in the study. "Cora," he said seriously, "you chose well. I wasn't sure at first, but he's a good man, better than good." "I know," she said softly. "And you're happy?" His eyes searched her face. Truly. She thought about laughter in the kitchen, hands touching across carriage seats, the way Tristan looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious. "I'm beginning to be," she admitted. Edmund hugged her tightly. "Good. You deserve it." That night, after Edmund had left and Martha had retired, Cordelia found Tristan in the library, as usual. He was working by lamplight, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that Cordelia tried very hard not to notice. "Edmund likes you," she said from the doorway. Tristan looked up, smiling. The feeling is mutual. Your brother is remarkable. You didn't have to offer to help him. Yes, he said simply. I did. She entered the room, drawn by something she couldn't name. The fire crackled. Rain had started outside, tapping against the windows. Why did you really marry me? She asked suddenly. You could have had anyone, someone from your own world, someone who understood business and society and— I didn't want anyone from my world, he interrupted quietly. I wanted you. But why? He stood, moved toward her, and the air between them seemed to thicken. Because you were honest, because you didn't pretend to be other than you were. Because when you looked at me in that solicitor's office, you saw a man, not a bank account or a social advantage. I saw someone kind, she whispered, and I saw someone brave. He was close now, close enough that she could smell cedar and ink and something uniquely him. Someone who sacrificed herself for her family without complaint. Someone who tried to burn dinner just to make me smile. That wasn't intentional. His laugh was soft. Even better. One hand came up, hesitant, to cup her face. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and Cordelia's breath caught. May I— he started. Yes, she breathed. The kiss was gentle, questioning, nothing like she'd imagined a dumb kiss could be. His lips were soft, and he tasted of brandy and promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark. I've wanted to do that, he murmured, since you laughed at the burned stew. Cordelia felt brave and reckless and more alive than she'd felt in years. She rose on her toes and kissed him again, less gentle this time. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something that made her head spin and her heart race. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Cordelia, he said, voice rough, I need to be clear about something. I don't want you to feel obligated. This marriage, our arrangement, you're free to— Tristan, she interrupted, what if I don't want to be free? What if I want this? This? You, us. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. What if I'm starting to care for you, really care for you? His expression was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Then I would say I've been caring for you since the moment you defended my worth to your mother, while believing I was nobody important. You were never nobody, she said fiercely. You were always— But he was kissing her again, and words didn't seem to matter anymore. Only this, his arms around her, his heart beating against hers, the knowledge that something real was growing between them, something that felt remarkably like love. The catastrophe arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in the form of Lady Beatrice Ashford and an entourage of relatives Cordelia had hoped never to see again. She was in the parlor when Martha showed them in, her expression apologetic. Cordelia's mother swept through the modest room with barely concealed disdain, followed by two of Cordelia's uncles and their wives. Mother, Cordelia said, standing, this is unexpected. Indeed. Lady Beatrice's eyes catalogued everything, clearly finding it all disappointingly middle class. We've come to call on your husband. Where is Mr. Vale? At his office. Of course he is, her mother said with false brightness. Working. How very industrious. Uncle George cleared his throat. Actually, Cordelia, we've heard some interesting rumors about your husband. Wanted to verify them ourselves, you understand. Dread pooled in Cordelia's stomach. What rumors? That he's not quite as modest as he appears, her mother said, settling onto the sofa without invitation. That he owns half of London, in fact. That you've married quite well indeed. Cordelia's hands clenched at her sides. I married a good man. That's all that matters. Don't be naive, Uncle George said bluntly. If the boy's wealthy, as they say, he'll want to help family. That's how these things work. Help family? Cordelia repeated slowly. You mean you want money? Don't be crass, dear, her mother chided. We merely thought we might discuss certain opportunities. Perhaps a small loan to restart the estate. No. The word came out harder than Cordelia intended. Her mother blinked, surprised. I beg your pardon? You heard me. No. Cordelia stood straighter. You forced me into this marriage. You sold me to clear your debts. And now you want to come here, to my home, and treat my husband like a bank to be plundered? Cordelia Margaret? You don't get to do that, Cordelia continued, her voice shaking with anger. You don't get to ignore me for months, to treat my wedding like an embarrassment, and then show up demanding favors. Tristan is my husband. He's a good, decent man who has shown me more consideration in a few weeks than any of you have in years. And I won't let you use him. How dare you speak to me? I dare because I'm finally seeing clearly. Cordelia moved to the door, opening it pointedly. I think you should leave. Her mother stood, face flushed with outrage. You ungrateful girl, after everything you what? Sacrificed me? Yes, you did, and I accepted it. But that debt is paid. You have no claim here. The relatives filed out with varying expressions of shock and indignation. Lady Beatrice paused at the threshold. You'll regret this, she hissed. No, Cordelia said quietly. I don't think I will. After they left, she sank onto the sofa, shaking with reaction. Martha appeared with tea. Well done, dear, the housekeeper said warmly. About time someone told them off. But Cordelia barely heard her, because in the doorway stood Tristan, still in his coat, eyes wide. How long have you been there? She whispered. Long enough, he said hoarsely. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. Long enough to hear you defend me, to hear you call me decent, to hear you choose me over them. Cordelia buried her face in his chest, breathing in cedar and safety. Of course I chose you. They wanted you for your money. I want you for... She stopped, afraid. For? He prompted gently. For you, she finished simply. Just you. She felt him shudder. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. Cordelia Vale, he said, I am completely, irrevocably in love with you. Her heart stopped, then started again, racing. You are? Devastatingly so. His hands framed her face. I have been for weeks, but I was afraid you'd feel obligated, or trapped, or... I love you too, she interrupted, the words bursting free. I love you too, and I don't care about the money or the secrets or any of it. I just want you. The kiss was different this time, not gentle or questioning, but claiming, a promise, and a declaration. When they broke apart, both smiling like fools, Martha discreetly retreated to the kitchen, muttering about young people and giving them space. But Cordelia barely noticed, because Tristan was looking at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked, and she was looking back the same way. There's something I need to show you, he said finally. Something I should have shown you from the beginning. What? The truth. He held out his hand. All of it. Will you come with me? Cordelia laced her fingers through his. Anywhere. The carriage ride was longer than Cordelia expected, taking them from their comfortable neighborhood into Mayfair, where the houses grew grander with each passing block. Tristan held her hand the entire time, his thumb tracing circles on her wrist that made her pulse flutter. Where are we going? She asked. Home, he said simply. Our real home, if you'll have it. They stopped in front of a mansion that took Cordelia's breath away. Cream-colored stone, elegant columns, windows that gleamed in the afternoon light. The kind of house she'd once envied, the kind that represented everything her family had lost. Liveried footmen opened the gate. The carriage pulled through into a courtyard that could have hosted a ball. Tristan, Cordelia breathed. What is this? This, he said, helping her down, is the residence of the Duke of Ashmont, or rather, the former Duke of Ashmont, me. The words didn't make sense. Duke. She turned to stare at him. You're a... I was, he corrected gently. I renounced the title 5 years ago. Gave it back to the crown, kept the wealth, lost the status. A butler appeared at the massive front door, bowing deeply. Your Grace, welcome home. I'm not... Tristan stopped, sighed. Thank you, Morrison. Cordelia felt like the ground was tilting beneath her feet. He led her inside, through rooms that were so far beyond anything she'd imagined that she couldn't quite process it. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that belonged in museums. I don't understand, she managed. Why would you— Let me show you something, he interrupted, guiding her to a room that appeared to be a study. He pulled out a leather-bound book, flipped through pages, and handed it to her. It was filled with newspaper clippings, articles about the disgraceful Duke, who engaged in trade, editorials condemning his lack of proper aristocratic values, caricatures showing him in a shop apron, counting coins while his coronet gathered dust. They despised me, Tristan said quietly. The society you came from, not because I was poor or incompetent, but because I worked, because I believed in building something, not just inheriting it. Every ballroom I entered, every club I tried to join, I was that Duke, the one who degraded his title. Cordelia's throat tightened as she read cruel words, vicious gossip, the systematic destruction of his reputation. So I gave them what they wanted, he continued. I returned the title, became just Mr. Vale, businessman, and suddenly, without the dukedom, I could breathe again. I could live according to my own values, not theirs. But you kept the fortune. The fortune was mine independently. My grandfather's investments, my own work. The title was theirs to take back. He took the book from her, set it aside. I tell you this not to impress you or to prove anything, but because I need you to understand. I know what it's like to be judged unfairly, to be reduced to a single aspect of yourself. When I met you, you were doing the same thing, being treated like nothing more than a transaction. So you tested me? The words came out smaller than she intended. No. He moved closer, urgent. No, Cordelia. I protected myself. There's a difference. I've had people, so many people, who wanted the Duke, the fortune, the connections. No one ever wanted just Tristan, just me. She thought of her mother's visit, of how she'd defended him before knowing any of this, and suddenly she understood his fear, his secrecy. But I chose you, she said slowly. When I thought you were a merchant, when I had nothing to gain except a decent husband. You did. His voice was rough. You chose me. You defended me. You loved me, or started to, without knowing about any of this. He gestured at the magnificent room around them. I feel like a fool, she admitted, living in that modest house while you owned this. Do you? He studied her face. Because that modest house is where we built something real, where we learned to laugh together, to trust each other, where you weren't Lady Cordelia forced into marriage with a duke, but just Cordelia, married to just Tristan. That house, he said fiercely, is more valuable to me than this entire mansion, because that's where you fell in love with me. Tears pricked Cordelia's eyes. You manipulative, wonderful, impossible man. Is that a yes? Hope flickered in his face. Yes to all of this? To me, completely? To a life where sometimes we'll live here, but mostly we'll live there. Because that's where we're happy? Cordelia walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens, the fountain, the sheer opulence of it all. Then she turned back to him, this man who'd renounced a dukedom but couldn't renounce his heart, who'd worked to build an empire but considered their modest library the real treasure, who'd hidden his fortune but never his kindness. I have one question, she said, anything. That night you kissed me in the library. Did you already love me then? A slow smile spread across his face. I've loved you since you tried to burn dinner, maybe even before that, since you called our marriage sufficient and made it sound like a challenge. And now? She moved toward him. What is it now? Now, he said, catching her hands. It's everything. You're everything. Even though I come with a grasping family and no dowry, and a tendency to ruin perfectly good beef stew, especially because of that, he said solemnly, though his eyes danced. The stew incident was the moment I knew you were the one. She laughed, the sound bright in the elegant room. You're ridiculous. I'm yours, he corrected. Completely, irrevocably yours. Tristan Edmund Vale, merchant, investor, reformed duke, terrible keeper of secrets, and absolutely devoted husband. Cordelia Margaret. Vale, she replied. Daughter of a bankrupt baron, disaster in the kitchen, defender of impossible men, and, she took a breath, let herself say it, hopelessly in love with you. The kiss was inevitable and perfect. His hands slid into her hair, hers clutched his coat, and they held on to each other like they were the only solid things in a shifting world. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Tristan rested his forehead against hers. No more secrets, he promised. No more doubts, she countered. Deal. They spent that evening transforming the mansion's oppressive grandeur into something that felt more like them. Tristan showed her room after room, each more magnificent than the last, and Cordelia mentally noted which could be converted into a proper library, which would make a perfect study for Edmund when he visited, which were simply too formal to ever be comfortable. We don't have to live here, Tristan said, watching her face as they toured. I kept it as an investment mostly, but the house in Bloomsbury, that's ours. That's home. Could we compromise? Cordelia asked, an idea forming. Keep both? Use this one when we need to be in society, when Edmund needs connections for his career, when we want to host something grand. But live in the other, where we can actually breathe? Relief flooded his features. That's perfect. You're perfect. I'm practical, she corrected. There's a difference. In the mansion's library, nearly 3 times the size of the one in Bloomsbury, they found Martha directing servants in unpacking crates of books. Thought you might be bringing the mistress here eventually, she said, with a knowing smile. Took the liberty of having your favorites brought over. Martha, you wonderful woman, Tristan said warmly. The housekeeper bustled over to Cordelia. I knew from the start, you know. Knew you were different. The way you looked at him in that church, like he was worth something. Not what he had, but who he was. She patted Cordelia's hand. That's all he ever wanted, dear. To be seen. I see him, Cordelia said softly, watching Tristan examine the books with the enthusiasm of a child in a sweet shop. All of him. A week later, Edmund arrived for dinner, and his reaction to the Mayfair mansion was everything Cordelia had anticipated. You're joking, he said flatly, staring up at the facade. Tell me you're joking. Would you believe we won it in a card game? Tristan asked innocently. Edmund looked at his sister. Cora, explain. Over dinner, served in a dining room that seated 40 but felt cozy with just the 3 of them at one end, they told him everything. The dukedom, the renunciation, the modest house that was still their real home. Edmund listened, processed, and finally said, So, when you offered to help with my legal career, I meant it genuinely, Tristan assured him. The connections are real, and you've earned them through your own merit. This, he gestured at the mansion, doesn't change that. Your family, Edmund. That means something to me. Edmund looked at Cordelia, who nodded. To her surprise, her brother grinned. A duke for a brother-in-law, he marveled. Wait until the fellows at university hear about this. Former duke, Tristan corrected. Still counts. Edmund raised his glass. To family, the kind you choose. They drank to that, and Cordelia felt something settle in her chest. This, the 3 of them together, laughing over wine and roasted chicken, this was what mattered. Not the mansion, or the fortune, or the title that was, and wasn't. Later, as they walked through the gardens, Edmund pulled her aside. You're happy, he observed. Really, truly happy. I am, Cordelia said, watching Tristan examine a rose bush with intense concentration. I didn't think I would be. When Mother arranged the marriage, I thought I was trading one prison for another. And instead, I found freedom, she smiled. Freedom to be myself, to be loved for who I am, not what I can offer. It's strange, isn't it? I was sold into marriage to save the family, and it ended up saving me. Edmund hugged her tightly. He's a good man, Cora. Better than good. I know, she whispered. I really know. The final confrontation came, as Cordelia should have expected, from her mother. Lady Beatrice arrived at the Mayfair mansion unannounced, sweeping past protesting footmen with the audacity of someone who'd never been denied anything. Cordelia and Tristan were in the morning room when Morrison announced her. "Shall I have her removed, Your Grace?" the butler asked Tristan quietly. "I'm not—" Tristan stopped, looked at Cordelia. "It's your decision." Cordelia stood, squaring her shoulders. "Show her in. Let's finish this." Her mother entered with her usual dramatic flair, but this time, Cordelia noticed things she'd missed before. The calculation in her eyes, the way she assessed everything in terms of value, the complete lack of warmth in her expression. "So it's true," Lady Beatrice said, looking around the room. "You've been hiding quite the secret, Mr. Vale. Or should I say, Your Grace?" "Mr. Vale is fine," Tristan said coolly. "I prefer it." How quaint. Her mother's smile was sharp. "Well, now that we understand each other properly, I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. The Ashford estate requires significant investment to return to profitability. As my son-in-law, and a duke, no less, surely you see the value in—" "No," Cordelia said firmly. Her mother blinked. "I wasn't speaking to you, dear." "Then speak to me," Tristan said, his voice like steel wrapped in silk. And hear the same answer. "No." "You can't be serious. Cordelia is my daughter. Cordelia is my wife," Tristan interrupted. "And you've forfeited any right to claim her when you sold her to me like chattel, then proceeded to insult both of us at every opportunity." Lady Beatrice's face flushed. "I did what was necessary for the family." "You did what was convenient for yourself," Cordelia said, finding her voice. "And I'm done, Mother. Done pretending that blood relation means anything when there's no actual care behind it. Done feeling guilty for being inconvenient. Done trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. How dare— No!" Cordelia stood, moved to Tristan's side. He immediately took her hand, anchoring her. "How dare you? How dare you come here to my home and try to exploit my husband's kindness? How dare you treat me like a disappointment for years, then expect me to hand you a fortune? I owe you nothing, Mother. Nothing except perhaps gratitude for forcing me into a marriage that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." Tristan squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles. "You'll regret this," Lady Beatrice hissed. "Both of you." "The only thing I regret," Cordelia said quietly, "is that it took me so long to see you clearly. Goodbye, Mother." Morrison appeared as if summoned, which, Cordelia suspected, he had been by some prearranged signal. "This way, madam." After she left, Cordelia sagged slightly. Tristan pulled her into his arms immediately. "That was magnificent," he murmured into her hair. "You were magnificent." "I'm shaking," she admitted. "You are still magnificent." He pulled back to look at her. "I'm so proud of you. She'll spread rumors, probably, make things difficult. Let her." Tristan smiled. "I've weathered worse gossip. We'll weather this together." Cordelia leaned into him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Together," she agreed. "I like that word." "As do I." He kissed her forehead, her cheek, finally her lips. "Partners, remember?" "Partners," she confirmed. "In everything." That evening, they returned to the house in Bloomsbury. The Mayfair mansion was magnificent, but this modest, comfortable house, with its worn furniture and cozy library, this was where they'd built their life. They sat together in front of the fire, Cordelia tucked against Tristan's side, his arm around her shoulders. No more secrets between them, no more doubts. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Renouncing the title? Giving up your place in society?" "Never," he said immediately. "That world, it wasn't interested in who I actually was. It wanted a title, a name, a symbol, not a person. And now? Now I have everything I actually wanted." He kissed the top of her head. "A woman who loves me, work that matters, the freedom to live on my own terms." Cordelia smiled against his chest. "When you put it that way, you've become quite the successful rebel. Is that what I am? A rebel duke who gave up his title for authenticity. Very romantic." She felt his laugh rumble through his chest. "I didn't do it to be romantic." But you are anyway. She tilted her head to look up at him. Romantic and ridiculous, and mine. Yours, he agreed, his eyes soft. Irrevocably, impossibly yours. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire crackle. Outside, London bustled with its evening activities, but inside their small house, everything was peaceful. Tristan? Cordelia said eventually. Thank you. For what? For seeing me, she said simply. For choosing me when you could have had anyone. For making me feel valuable when I'd forgotten how. He shifted so he could look at her properly, his hand cupping her face. Cordelia, you brilliant, fierce, wonderful woman. You were always valuable. I just had the extraordinary luck to recognize it. She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude and love and promise and hope. When they finally broke apart, both smiling, she whispered, I love you. Not the Duke, not the fortune, not any of it. Just you. Just me, he repeated, like it was the most precious thing he'd ever heard. And just you is all I've ever wanted. They stayed there by the fire until the logs burned to embers, planning their future, how they'd help Edmund, where they'd travel, which charitable causes they'd support together. The great fortune Tristan had built would be put to good use, but the real treasure, the thing that mattered most, was right here. Two people who'd been sold, rejected, and underestimated by society, finding each other and building something real. Later, as Cordelia drifted towards sleep in her comfortable bedroom, she smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. She'd married a nobody for convenience and discovered he owned everything. But more importantly, she'd discovered that what he owned didn't matter nearly as much as who he was. And who he was hers. The gentleman's fortune, she thought drowsily, wasn't measured in pounds or properties or titles. It was measured in laughter and trust and love freely given. And by that measure, they were both richer than they'd ever dreamed possible.